And now for our final presentation of the day, we'll hear about the role of Cadence in market mix modeling. Matt Voda is CEO of OptiMine, where he brings his extensive experience in SaaS technology and analytics. He has passion about marketing analytics and educating marketers on agile marketing measurement. Please welcome Matt.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for going the distance this afternoon. We're almost there. I'm Matt Voda. I'm general manager, I used to be CEO, now general manager of OptiMine. We're now part of Uptempo, a new parent company. I'm going to talk about model refresh cadence, specific to MMMs. We talked a lot about MMMs today, and a question that we get very frequently is, how often should we be updating our models? What's the right cadence for our business? And I'm really excited to talk about some research that our data science team put together to answer that question. So just a little bit about OptiMine. We provide MMM solutions to brands. And in many of those conversations, in particular with brands that may be a little less experienced with marketing mix modeling, maybe new to the solution, this question comes up very frequently. And we really started to think more closely about how should we guide our brands to answer that question, and what is the right cadence? And in terms of the frequency, what's fast enough? And it's a pretty difficult question to answer because you have to go faster to kind of know what the right cadence is. And if you're using MMM today, maybe you have a biannual read, maybe you're doing quarterly, you don't actually know what the right cadence is, or more specifically, what you could expect if you went faster until you actually do it. And it's an important question to answer, in particular because there are presumably some business implications to the answer. So, starting out though, let's just kind of define what a refresh is and what it isn't. So when we talk about a model refresh, we're talking about a full retrain of models using new data, new history, new marketing execution. It's a new model. And conversely, it isn't just scoring an existing set of coefficients with an existing model with new observations. So when we talk about a model refresh, it's fundamentally a new model. And that cadence then is how often are you actually rebuilding models over time? And why should we care? Well, we have two kind of working assumptions, and I don't think we're out on a limb with either of these. One is that we assume that the kind of predictive power of a model declines over time. There's a degradation that occurs. It kind of looks like this curve. And secondly, as I said, there's an assumption that the decision quality that you have over time declines, and therefore there's a business performance implication as a result. Poor decisions, using an older model, your effectiveness would suffer. And if we look at kind of nirvana here, ideally, what a brand would do is they kind of know what the right cadence is. They refresh to kind of keep that optimal performance and kind of avoid that degradation over time. And it's timed closely with that degradation. So and net result is that we've got good sustained performance with our marketing investments and therefore the most optimal business performance as a result. So I just kind of thinking about this a little more, I asked myself, well, does this make sense? If you could go faster, is it a good idea? And there's some pros and cons, I think, to consider. On the just do it side, you've got a competitive consideration. If you know that you're able to move faster than your competitors, presumably you have an information advantage, and that's a good thing from a brand standpoint. You're accounting for changes that might be happening in your own marketing execution, and you're picking those up faster. both positive and negative. Consumer behaviors shift. We certainly saw this post-COVID. In certain categories, consumer behavior shifted very quickly, and legacy models can struggle to keep up with that kind of fast-changing environment. Being able to provide timely business guidance to business teams is critically important. And obviously, if you do that, move faster, you'd expect better performance. But there are some real potential downsides. And one is that this might put more stress on the teams that are supporting the solution, particularly on the IT or data side, and having to produce data at a faster cadence is not a zero cost. One consideration is, are we overfitting noise? So, and I think that's a real kind of overfitting consideration. Is, are we just kind of chasing ghosts with the models, and a lot of kind of variability as a result. This misaligned guidance and decision timing. The context here is, going fast for fast's sake may not make sense because your own decisions, your own investment decisioning process may not align with faster models. If you're only adjusting budget, let's say on a quarterly basis, getting a monthly read may not make so much sense. And the last one, and I'll talk about this a little later, is, and this is a surprise for many brands that do go faster, is what do you do when the answer changes? And are you equipped to deal with that? And I raise this because I think it throws some marketers off. They get comfortable with a particular picture of value or contribution, and suddenly that changes, and it can tend to paralyze the decision-making process. So that's, ironically, it's probably one of the biggest considerations for all of this. So let's dive in, talk about the research. So we started a project earlier this year to answer this question. In terms of designing the experiment, obviously we're comparing model degradation over time and at varying refresh intervals. The original question was, what's the right, most optimal cadence with the brands that we put through this experiment? We obviously need to control for exogenous factors with this to really hone in on the kind of marketing piece of this question. And then obviously the objective is can we define that optimal cadence? So the data science team at OptiMine then went through our client set and selected sample kind of participants, if you will. And it was important to have a longer history of models that the brands were already refreshing at a fast cadence, and typically that was monthly. And then the brands had relatively stable taxonomies. And if you know that you're delivering MMM, you know that changing data hierarchies and taxonomies really are kind of a vexing thing for a model refresh. You've got to kind of adapt and change. So we wanted some stability in that sample set. And we trimmed out kind of the COVID era just to kind of keep that kind of unique variability out of the project. The other consideration was this is a fairly computationally heavy exercise, so there's a cost consideration for us to do this, and running hundreds or thousands of model iterations is not free, and it's a real consideration. So to address some of that, the team actually built a whole kind of automation framework to run this experiment. And to cycle through these iterations. And it took about 6 months. So we started in April and just finished this in September of this year. So how does it work? So essentially what we did is we took an original model. It was about 2 years of history. And we ran essentially an optimized media recommendation off of that model. We call it a plan. And then as we iterated through, we elongated a window in 1 month increments. So what happens to that answer, that plan, if we wait 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and so on and so forth? And what is the degradation that occurs? And so we compare that answer against a known, the known business result that's being measured to get that answer put together. And so what we expected to see, and it was so interesting, I remember sitting down with the lead on this project. He showed me the results, and this was the curve that I reviewed, and I thought, oh, this is exactly what I expected. And show of hands, how many of you expected to see the same thing? You can be honest. You get some gradual degradation, and then all of a sudden it's really going to start to drop off over time. And that's the first sample was a large retailer. It's what we saw, and I started to get excited because I thought, okay, if this pattern really starts to hold up over more client sample sets, then we may actually be able to provide a clear answer in terms of kind of optimal cadence. So, but I had to put my own personal excitement aside and say, let's trust the data. Let's run more through the experiment and see how the answer kind of holds up. So, clickbait kind of tease here. You won't believe what happened next. The answer was not consistent at all. So as we ran more brands through this exercise, that degradation curve was all over the map. In fact, it wasn't really a curve in many cases. And you can see a frequency histogram here, of the kind of frequency of the level of changes. This isn't necessarily the percentage of degradation or change based on time. It was, as I said, it was kind of all over the map. And the thing that we took out of this was that it's there's an unknown risk here, but it's a real risk in that the brand doesn't necessarily know when the degradation's happening until it's too late, if they know at all, and that is not a predictable thing, and that was very clear in this data. And the degradation ranged from close to zero all the way to over 50% in terms of that. And as I said, it had no correlation to the time window at all. So in retrospect, I guess it should have been maybe a little more predictable. We maybe should have expected to see this. And in thinking about that, there's some real reasons for why I think this result appeared. And there's a lot of kind of marketing execution change, in particular, that happens kind of deep under the covers that may not be readily visible to the business side at a top level. If you think about your paid social teams and their agency partners, there may be a relatively flat line with Facebook at the surface, but they're probably tuning and executing and testing to a pretty substantial degree deep under the covers. And those things, those execution changes actually are meaningful and will impact kind of the predictive accuracy. Creatives change, the media strategy, so on and so forth. And the fact that execution is changing is a good thing. Teams should be doing that. But the problem is that it introduces this risk. And then, as we talked about earlier, consumer behaviors evolved, and COVID was a perfect example of this. But I would also relate this to kind of the competitive aspect of the market that the brand may be in, and there are other forces that may be changing that consumer behavior that are maybe a little more difficult to capture in the model. And these things are things that the brand can't necessarily control. And so, again, it's kind of contributing factor to this kind of variable degradation that we're seeing. And I think it goes without saying that models are kind of rearview mirror, and they reflect the past. And as things change, it's the degradation is going to happen. It'll be real. And this last point, in terms of our kind of collective view as an industry in terms of MMM, in many cases, and I hear this all the time in industry conversations, there's this point of view that MMM is our kind of strategic guide. We do it on an annual basis. I think what this suggests is that's a limited view, and it's a problematic view. And with the kind of unpredictable nature of change that's happening underneath the model, that's a relatively risky point of view. Is that MMM actually needs to modernize and needs to go faster. And by moving faster and updating and refreshing faster, you've got a better shot at staying kind of at that optimal level. So some best practices. So in terms of moving faster, the alignment of the decisioning to the refresh cadence is important, and that's probably the first place to stop is to make sure that the refresh cadence that they're using is aligned to the cadence at which you're making investment changes and decisions around investment changes. And along with that, there's a real data infrastructure kind of consideration. If you intend to go faster, the data side of this is critically important, and being able to produce really sterling data on a repeated, scaled basis is essential to making this move. More tactically, as brands think about this, you want to kind of start with the biggest drag of your refresh speed. Sometimes it may be certain data isn't as available as quickly. Certainly we see that with TV post-buy reports that are lagged. But sometimes there may be other things in that kind of model delivery process that just take time. And those are the places to attack first and really chip away at those aspects that are contributing to delays in your own refresh cadence today. And then as you kind of go down this path, it helps to start with kind of desired state in terms of decisioning, and it kind of gets to that first point to align the refreshes with kind of where you want to be from a decisioning standpoint. And on the flip side, then moving fast for fast speed sake is really it shouldn't be a priority. And we've seen this actually in some cases when brands were working to kind of move them along this evolution, and jumping into kind of the deep end of the pool can create some issues for the MMM program itself. So it can create some chaos. It can create some difficulty that drains confidence in the program, and so there's a real kind of readiness and commitment level that is required before you just go for it. And that will tend to avoid those confidence draining issues. I'm going to go through all this, but I do want to talk about managing changing answers. I talked about this at the beginning. This is a real consideration. So on one hand, the reason you want to go faster and with a more frequent cadence is you actually want to capture those changes, and you want your decisions to reflect that changing answer. That's a good thing. But in many cases, I think MMM is used as kind of a keeping score mechanism. And when the answers change, it's perceived as a threat. In particular, if I'm responsible for a particular channel and that number suddenly declines next month, maybe I look bad. Maybe I really need to challenge that. And certainly, challenging it is a good thing, but it needs to come from a place of trying to understand what drove the change, and embracing that answer because it's how you make better decisions. So I do believe that that's one of the bigger kind of stumbling blocks that the brands need to keep in mind when kind of thinking about improving the speed of their own programs is how well equipped are you just from kind of a decisioning maturity standpoint to deal with the fact that answers are going to change, and that's a good thing. That's why you want to do this. So happy to answer questions. I went through a fair amount of detail here. I'll take time for Q&A. Oh, and you can get the case study here with the QR code as well.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, no, that's very interesting. This is something I think we all face, is this cadence problem. So when we look at cadence, when we look at marketing mix deliverables, what you say ultimately things have to go faster. What has to go faster? Because there's a high level at which you could say take CTV or streaming and look at the effectiveness at a very high level, right? Our clients also want drill downs into partners and like the next level down. Typically what happens in that data is as you go down in time, it starts to fragment up. They could have switched partners. Things start abruptly, right? So what do you think has to go far? And we also find that the level of QA, of quality assurance, increases exponentially the deeper you go. Because just take an example of, confirming CPMs of low-level things with agencies and all that stuff versus like, they might give you a high-level CPM and everyone can go with it. They don't actually question it because it's not at the detail level that they really want to action, right? So what do you think is actually, and then we have Ross today who actually went completely backwards on the whole problem, doing an elastic net first at the detail level because the people are interested in campaigns, and then did the other thing at a slower level. So what has to go faster is my question.
The refresh, so at a high level, the refresh or the rebuild of the model, and I'm not necessarily talking about the time it takes to do that. What I'm talking about is the cadence at which it's done. So, if the brand is doing that twice a year, I think that there's a quantifiable risk in that versus maybe going 6 times a year or whatever a more frequent cadence is. It's less so about the kind of the delivery speed. You raise a point about granularity, and you're right. The deeper you go down, it's almost exponential. The QA consideration and risk and dirtiness and all that. And so if you're trying to do more frequent cadence at a much deeper level of detail, kind of deep within channels, the only real way to get there is with a really robust QA automation and data automation. It's a lot of MMM today is still very manual, and without the automation, you'll die. And the problem that I talked about earlier is now you have a credibility issue with the program, and there are kind of political challenges that come with that. And automation on the data ingestion and data QA side is part of the solution to more frequent refresh cadences. But granularity is this. It's kind of a devil in terms of its impact on the ability to do it.
I would say sometimes even if you automate it perfectly.
Yeah, and there is automation that can detect the changes in the taxonomy. It still requires a human to say, that's okay, it's not a mistake, it's acceptable. But to the extent that you can automate the catching of those issues, you can increase the speed. Good questions. Yeah?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.